Okay, so this is a hold by Element Mystic, the guys who choked like motherfuckers in the Korean Contenders Finals, but quarterfinals even. But before that, looked like easily the best team in Contenders Korea. Very young players, and they like to have a lot of these Orisa strategies. And they didn't do this before Pogpo joined the lineup, but they certainly do a lot of them now. Maybe Pogpo's better, or maybe they just came up with the strategy. I know that a lot of people are giving their coach quite a bit of credit, so let's break this one down on Numbani. So the idea in general is that you are baiting them to dive into you. So the normal way that Numbani plays in terms of the attacking team is that some of you will push up here, and then the divers will go on there. Normally, when you're playing a dive defense, you back off to create distance between you, and then you try and retake the point after these guys swing onto the point. So and then either like your Zen will come top, or your Zen can come bottom and peek out this door, or sometimes you sit your Zen in the back. Anyway, that's how things would normally go. So they're expecting the red team here, which is Condu Panthera, to push up main and then try a dive on the top because that's just classic Numbani. So this defensive setup has in fact, it has a huge amount of them. So here is the Widow is going to sit here and cover this sight line, which means that not only do you catch people as they cross onto the point, if they play the point. So, for example, if the Zen comes up main, you'll be able to catch him because the Widow's supposed to be sat really far back. It also denies this top ground because you have a sight up here, and it also denies anybody playing this high ground if they try and flank around and come up top, like Decay is going to try to on this Pharah. In theory, the Widow should be able to lock off these sightlines. So that's where the Widow's going to play from. The rest of them, which is Pokpo, Dako, Sparkle, and Jexa, the other four, are going to play around this area. And their idea is that Pokpo is going to use the Fortify to deny the. Oh, give me a second here. Boom! Pokpo is going to use the Fortify to deny himself the instead of falling off and creating room between them, he's going to use Fortify just to stay where he is and try and do a lot of damage to the divers. Dako's going to peel a lot of it off. Sparkle's going to do a ton of damage. And Jex is going to try and get the res off. Repel is on Torbjorn, and he's going to build kind of in this direction. You know that pillar that's over there, so that you get sight lines all over the place. But then he's going to rebuild in this corridor down here, so that you get a sight line onto the divers. So when these guys dive in, there's a sight line around there, and it also denies any tracers that go for the flank around the back. Because a really good way of breaking very heavy anti-dive strategies like this is to get your tracer in a good position behind them, and then you collapse from all different sides, and the guys can't do enough damage enough peeling to be able to take it away. That's what Boston are very good at in recent times. Okay, so Kongdi Panthera gets wrecked on this first push, so let's have a look at it. So, uh, yep, 10 seconds in here, so we can take a look at what happens. So the Decay goes around the side. They're playing a Pharah and a Genji. This is just so this is the Torbjorn turret in position, in its first position, and you can actually see Repel, who is on Torb, getting ready to build the second one, and he is in here. So again, this Torb turret is going to lock off sight lines over this way, and also stops a Tracer getting in behind and flanking from that direction. So the Torb turret provides a nice angle down this way and a nice angle down that way. It's fairly self-sufficient, and it's just a little added extra. Rather than, I think the idea of it really is just that instead of having a Tracer there, which you could lose the Tracer 1v1 and end up giving up a lot of position, it's just maybe a little bit more reliable. And it's just another added quirk. The thing about these strategies is that they normally have very specific counterplays. If you figure out what they are and spend a lot of time breaking them down, you can devise a strategy to completely wreck whatever element Mystic are running here. But because it's so surprising when it's first run, it makes it very difficult to adapt to on the fly. You've got no coaches speaking in your ear when you're in the middle of a game. So these strategies that Element Mystic run are great for knocking people off their game early on. Now you can also see that Z has, or XZ as the Korean casters call him, has got an angle here onto the Pharah. Doesn't quite land the kill I think this time, but it just does a little bit of damage. So again, you see the dive coming in from Condu Panthera. Fortify's used. They're just doing a huge amount of damage. Sparkle is doing loads of damage here alongside Pogpo to Roar and to Ding and to Youngjin. and they're just kind of getting shredded. Yes, they eventually kill Sparkle, but they can get the res on Sparkle. They're not really bothered. If they lose Pokpo or Sparkle, they can get the res off super easy. So this anti-dive strategy is catching the dive, as Hex likes to call it. And now Decay and Luffy are forced to retreat. So if we whip this one forwards to the next fight, you can see that. Okay, so this time they play the point. All right, let's dial it back a little bit. So this time you can see the positioning of all these guys is up top, and now instead of Conquered Panthera jumping up towards them, Jesus, that's a terrible arrow. So they would like normally jump up towards them here. Instead of doing that, the adaptation is just to go straight to point. And as we pointed out before, that gives Z an angle here as the supports cross, and it also means that Pokpo is going to drop down to the point. So Pokpo is now going to be the guy that's blocking the point along with Dako. So here, as Raw decides to play the point instead, Dako's going to go down and try and pressure Raw because he's used his cooldown. Dako backs off, and he's there to support Pokpo. So this is now their defensive setup. They can set up around here. Now this does make Jexa on the Mercy a little more vulnerable, and also means that if you kill Dako, which in theory you should be able to get at some point a decent angle because he has to keep taking the pressure away from Pokpo, it should be slightly easier for you to demate the Diva. But they don't really focus on Dako a lot of the time. They tend to focus on Pokpo and Sparkle a little more because they're the guys doing all the damage to them. So, and then here's another really crucial part of the play. I'm just going to wind this back a little bit, and this is what is common to all of Element Mystic's Orisa strategies, is that when the dive successfully kills a target, which is normally Pokpo, but is sometimes Sparkle as well, what will happen is that Dako will use his self-destruct to buy a lot of space. So he's going to shoot this one straight up in the air, and while everyone else runs for cover, while they're forced to kind of hide in this room or get out this way or use their Winston bubble or something, that gives enough space for Jexa to come in with the Resurrect. Sometimes Jexa uses the Valkyrie as well to make it easier for him to quickly get out afterwards, so he's less likely to die. But just like clockwork, you'll see this run all the time, is that as soon as somebody dies, in this case it is Pokpo that dies, I believe. Yeah, so Pokpo dies. Here you can see they invested a lot. Dako straight up with the self-destruct, and Jexa uses the Valkyrie. And while everybody else has to run away there, you can see Jexa's already going for the Resurrect, and immediately Pokpo is back up. So now they've managed to find a pick. Condu Panthera have used all of their cooldowns, and Element Mystic have used Ultimate, yes, but it was only a self-destruct, and they're able to get themselves straight back up to 6 men. And if you're playing a defense, it's just more about staying alive, right? Especially if you burn the cooldowns to the other team, you're in a decent position. So now they just kind of wreck them again. So self-destruct into the resurrect, huge component of this. Z dies, but he's going to be up in time. And because Pokpo fell down to block the point, in the time that it takes Condu Panthera to reset and respawn from Numbani, Pokpo is going to walk all the way around up top and set back up in their default position. So it's just a strat that they can run again and again and again. So Pokpo relocates back up top. You can see here as well that Repel's actually built his turret in that number 1 position, especially now that Decay has moved away from the Pharah. Before, he could get long-range poke onto the turret, but now that he's Tracer, this kind of blocks off this sightline a little bit, and then once Decay gets behind, Jexa can build the turret here, as was normal. So the Torb turrets move just for it burns extra time, which allows Dako to get back up to a self-destruct, which is really important for this strategy. And it also allows Jexa to get back up to the Valkyrie, so there you can see he's relocated the turret over there. And let me just wind back, because I believe Decay goes for a flank at this point. Oh yeah, so there we go. So what happens there is that Decay uses, I think, 3 blinks to be able to get into this back alley and pressure Repel, and this turret doesn't really cover it. So Repel's going to be forced to build his turret over in that direction, I think. Or actually doesn't even get it down in time. But Sparkle can use the Riptire. Repel has his Molten Core active as well. So they have a lot of big ultimates to be able to work with. Difficult to push a Molten Core, very difficult to push a Riptire. And then that buys time for the self-destruct and the Valkyrie to come back online. So next time they push, even if they lose Pokpo again, or if they lose Sparkle again, they can use this self-destruct up in the air and the resurrect. So this strategy is has very nice synergies between the ultimates as well. You can see Z just getting a little bit cheeky here. Going to go back into his normal positioning. Uh, and as they push back in again, they've got a sound barrier, and this self-destruct comes out at the same time as the Valkyrie. But this time they don't really need to invest it to resurrect somebody. They're just using it for damage because they think they can win the fight. So I'm not actually. I think what happened there in this fight is that Kongu Panthera decided to deep dive Z in the back. Is that what happens? So Z goes back. He's recognized Decay is over here. They use a sound barrier. What do they do with the sound barrier? I think they try to dive the top with the sound barrier, and Dako uses the ultimate just to um, make sure that they can't get any value out of the sound barrier, especially after they've deep committed so hard. So it's a very strong defensive position, difficult to break when the ultimates are up. Um, and now there's only 50 seconds. So no ultimates online at the moment. So Conde Pantera have a decent chance of being able to take it in this next push, but it's still difficult to take even when you have an ultimate advantage. Especially when you're not running a mercy. Like I think they're even having an even bigger problem here. Youngjin's just feeding. I mean, that's unacceptable. Youngjin's their win condition with the Genji blade. But at that point, kind of the damage has been done. They're tilted. They don't know how to work around this strategy. They're just getting destroyed. So just to wind back a little bit though, I would love to see how. Let's see if I can get a good position over the fight. Maybe in the previous one. So I would love to see how Sombra interacts with this. So I think a few things that you could do better if you can't do Panthera. Stick to the Mercy and the Lucio, which means you'll get very fast deep dives into here and try and really aggressively take out Jexa. Or put a lot of damage onto Dako. I think all of these Orisa defenses really hinge on Dako being alive. If you can get a D-mech on him before he gets his ultimate up to be able to remech, I think that's a win condition in and of itself. Um, Keeping your Mercy in the composition to have very deep dives and stay alive is important. And the other thing is see how a Sombra works into it, because I'd love to see if you can get a hack onto Dako. I think Dako is the linchpin, the anchor, the plug of this composition. So if you can take him out, I think a lot of the rest of it falls apart, because then you can get better dives onto Sparkle. You might be able to get onto Jexa without the peel from the defense matrix being there, especially if you can play the point and force Dako down. Force Pokpo down when Dako doesn't have his mech. You should be able to get the kill on Pokpo, and then the self-destruct isn't there, so they can't really punish. They can't really get space for Jexa to be able to resurrect. Um, and just when you run the Sombra, you should be able to EMP these guys as well, and this doesn't work half as well if their abilities are offline. But it is a very good hold by Element Mystic, and they do like to run it a lot, so I think it's a cool strategy. And I like the way that Korean Contenders, with its kind of slightly more spaced out games than Overwatch League, is developing stuff like this. Even though they choked mega hard in the finals. That's just how the cookie crumbles, I guess.